as the truck carrying the massive ironwood log backed into the yard. Morning mist still hung low in the air. The bark of the tree carried the scent of fresh sap and forest soil, bringing with it the breath of distant mountains. 4 workers coordinated with a crane to hoist the nearly 1-ton log onto the support rack. The 2-meter saw blade began to spin, the engine growling like a warning. As the steel blade bit into the wood, it let out a piercing screech before settling into a steady rhythm, an industrial symphony. Sawdust exploded in all directions, clinging to the workers' clothes like snowfall. Beneath the yellow factory lights, the wood grain began to reveal itself reddish, moist, and fragrant like the lifeblood of a tree freshly opened. Inside the aging sawmill, light filtered through rusted tin panels, casting angled rays onto the dusty floor. A 60 centimeters diameter log was slowly being fed into the vertical saw. A young worker bent low, eyes fixed on the contact point between the blade and the log, one hand steadying the wood, the other guiding the table. As the log split in two, sap began to ooze along the cut, releasing a pungent, earthy aroma, a mix of fresh timber, hot steel, and machine oil, unique to sawmills. Thin sheets of wood peeled away, smooth and flat like sheets of glass. Sweat dotted the young man's face, but his eyes burned with focus and passion, as if every cut was a brush stroke on his masterpiece. Mr. Tam, an experienced carpenter with over 40 years in the trade, gently laid his hand on the old oak log before him, as if greeting an old friend. "The grain runs diagonal here. One wrong move and it'll split," he muttered while feeling the wood and tilting his head to check the angle. When the machine roared to life, he nudged the lever ever so slightly. The blade sliced down the wood slowly and precisely. After each push, he paused for a second, listening to the screech, sensing the vibration through his palm. Tiny sparks flickered from the friction of dry wood on steel. The first slices slid off, revealing pale brown rings flowing like waves, memories of a forest locked in silence for decades. Every morning, before any cuts are made, the lead worker meticulously checks the entire system: indicator lights, lubricant levels, blade tension. Everything must be perfect. A heavy chunk of paddock wood is lifted onto the cutting table via steel conveyor. When the gears align, the whole system roars awake like a beast disturbed. The spinning blade glints under the flickering fluorescent lights. The high-pitched buzz of wood against blade first jars the ear, then settles into a familiar hum, like a lullaby for woodworkers. As each plank drops, the assistant swiftly gathers them, stacking them in neat piles. Another team member records measurements and qualities, seemingly minor tasks that actually determine the value of the entire batch. At noon, sunlight poured through the gaps in the corrugated roof, illuminating a fragrant rosewood log waiting to be cut. Its rich aroma filled the air, soft and earthy, like wet soil after rain. A young sawyer carefully positioned the log on the angled vertical saw, adjusting the 45-degree cut according to the blueprint. As the blade glided through, the log shivered lightly, the rhythmic hum mimicking the steady breath of a living being. The red-brown grain swirled into view like flowing silk, each line graceful and natural. His hands moved quickly to manage the feed rate, ensuring the blade didn't burn the surface. For a moment, it felt like nature herself was unveiling hidden layers of her own soul. In another corner of the workshop, a large rotary saw was slicing through a massive redwood trunk. Two workers worked in sync, pushing the log steadily along the axis, their hands firm to avoid any shake or slip. The blade screeched, tearing the log like paper. Sawdust sprayed in every direction, coating their hair and shoulders, yet neither blinked. They stayed locked in on every inch of the cut. One measured the thickness of the plank that emerged, marking details in a notebook, then nodded for the next pass. The entire rhythm of their work flowed like the inner gears of a vintage clock, precise, deliberate, irreplaceable. By late afternoon, a cool breeze drifted through the workshop's cracks, carrying specks of sawdust suspended in light. A monkeypod log with white girth was laid out for cutting. The elder sawyer quietly circled the log, sketching chalk marks along its surface, mapping where each cut would go. When the blade began slicing, the wood crackled slightly, a familiar sound signaling a clean break. The revealed cross-section glowed honey gold under the setting sun, shimmering like melted sugar. The freshly cut wood still held moisture, giving off a soft steam and a wild, tangy scent that turned heads even in a room full of timber. Once the vertical cuts are completed, the wood is transferred to the horizontal saw to be trimmed into precise planks. This stage demands extreme accuracy. One small deviation and the whole batch could be ruined. The operator glued his eyes to the measurement grid, adjusting blade speed, cut angle, and push strength. The engine roared, and the wood quivered as the blade passed through. The cut came out perfectly smooth, no splinters, no cracks. That flawless finish was a quiet badge of honor for the worker, a symbol of his careful technique and attention to every detail. As dusk fell and the sun became a smear of orange on the horizon, the roar of machinery started to fade. Yet one final job remained, a precious piece of black wood needed to be finished. This dense, hard wood with its stunning grain demanded patience and delicacy. The senior sawyer and his apprentice stood on opposite ends, working together to guide each precise cut. As each slice revealed new grain, deep purples and swirling lines as unique as fingerprints, the apprentice marveled aloud. Inside each vein of wood lay a sleeping forest spirit, now slowly waking through each pass of the blade. The final step after sawing is stacking and documenting. The fresh boards, still sticky with sap, gave off heat and breath like something alive. Each worker had their own way of classifying the cuts by hue, pattern, moisture, or natural curvature. These weren't just people cutting wood, they were interpreters of timber, listening to the subtle whispers of each board to know if it was happy or sad, soft or stubborn. A day of sawing wood ends not only with neatly stacked piles but also with a silent satisfaction etched into the soul of every craftsman present.